member for District 2. I am also Vice Chair of the Transportation Committee, and as of yesterday, I am Vice Chair of the Met Council. Our Chair Zelli is having a conflict right now, and he may join us a little bit later. So I will be standing in his stead and calling this meeting into order, and I want to welcome everyone. We have a new member who has joined the CMC, Meg Forney. Is she here? Okay, I want to acknowledge her as a new member. President of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Are there any other new members that would like to introduce themselves? Or actually, I think we can go around the table, starting to my left with Councilmember Robert Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks. Robert Lilligren, Met Council District 7. So it's South Central Minneapolis, downtown to the river, North Loop, all of North Minneapolis, and Robbinsdale.
Jeff Lenny, District 1, Hennepin County Commissioner.
Bill Blonigan, Robbinsdale Mayor, also council member.
Aaron Wagner, council member on the Robbinsdale City Council.
Hi, Therese Kaiser, council member for City of Crystal.
Jim Adams, Crystal Mayor.
Jason Greenberg, CAC co-chair.
April Crockett, Mindat Metro District.
Nick Thompson, Metro Transit.
Nick Landwehr, Blue Line Extension.
Dan Solar, Blue Line Extension staff in Hennepin County.
Chris Beckwith, Blue Line Extension Project.
Ricardo Perez with Blue Line Coalition. We're a corridor-wide team of organizations in North Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, etc.
Hi, everybody. I'm newish. I couldn't be here for the last meeting, but I'm delighted to be here today. I'm Marion Green. I'm on the Hennepin County Board, and I'm chair of the Rail Authority.
I'm John Pacheco, Met Council Member, District 6, pretty much the west side of Minneapolis. Lindale going this way, then Golden Valley and New Hope and a few other places, St. Louis Park.
Suzanne Sabatka, Senior Policy Aide to Mayor Fry. I work on infrastructure and legislative affairs for the mayor.
Irene Fernando, District 2 Commissioner at Hennepin and Board Chair.
Thank you, everyone. I want to ask a little favor of you because there are some folks that are newer to me than others. If you could take your tent and kind of put it at an angle so I can see your names, I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much. As a reminder, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded by the Met Council. The mics are live in this room, and we have handouts for you at the front if you haven't picked them up today, and will be posted on the project's website, bluelineext.org. Members of the public watching the meeting can submit comments for the CMC consideration to Congo Sigolo until Friday, March 17th, to Congo's email address shown at the bottom of the, is she at the bottom of the screen? Yes, it's at the bottom of the screen. And they will be posted on the project's website as part of the meeting summary. We ask kindly that any follow-up conversations after the meeting be moved to the lobby so others can use this room following our meeting. Thank you. At our last CMC meeting in February, we focused on City of Brooklyn Park design elements, and today we'll be discussing the project design elements within the City of Crystal. The next two upcoming CMC meetings will be focused on the cities of Robbinsdale and Minneapolis. Also on the agenda today is an overall project update, an environmental update, and an anti-displacement update. At this time, I would like to ask for approval of the February 9th, 2023 BLRT CMC meeting summary. That summary was sent out to everyone Thursday, March 2nd for review and should be in your packet for reference. If there are any edits, please let us know for staff to capture.
I move approval of that summary.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded, and all in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? That motion carried. Thank you for the meeting summary approved, and it'll be posted on our website. Next, we have an update from the Community and Business Advisory Committee reports. We will start with the Community Advisory Committee because our Business Advisory Committee reporter, Pastor Dan, may be joining us later due to a conflict. So now we'll take the committee report from the Business Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. So I wasn't at our last meeting, but I watched the video and read some of the notes, so I will represent our group, but I won't be able to answer additional questions really. And I also have to leave early today, so I apologize. But in our last meeting, there were questions around and a discussion about who handles costs on infrastructure. So is that a city responsibility or project? So some of those issues were addressed, and it sounds like, depending on what it addresses, it could potentially be part of Met Council in Hennepin County. Some of that is responsible from the city, and that was driven by what's the discussion around what's happening in Crystal. It sounds like we talked about the most recent meeting that happened in Crystal, and actually I'm in Robbinsdale. We just had a meeting. We didn't discuss it in our CAC meeting, but a great turnout to our most recent Robbinsdale meeting. But at the Crystal meeting, there were citizens concerned about physical safety, property, and traffic impacts, including noise. And then they also discussed potentially doing a bus tour of the route for the CAC. So that it's not scheduled yet, but it came up as an idea. So I think that's something that'll probably come up in subsequent meetings and could potentially be scheduled. Then there were also some questions around the timing of different milestones, around station placement or and when those will be decided, how those will be, where exactly they'll be permanently placed, I guess, or, that's not, it hasn't been decided yet, but also talking about bus routes and how those will be impacted, and also when new bus routes will be decided as they relate to the Blue Line project. So that's an encapsulation of our meeting. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think those are some really good questions, and the Met Council has been having recent discussions about responsibility for costs, and it's part of our risk assessment that is going to be reviewed today, and it's also part of the Transitway policy that the Met Council has put together and is sharing with all of our partners. And the tour sounds like fun. I'd like to find out when that's going to get scheduled, and if I'm available, I'd certainly like to attend. Safety and traffic issues are on the forefront of everyone's mind, so glad to hear that everyone is working together and concerned about getting those issues resolved. And I think we're going to be talking about the placement of the stations today with some of the designs, maybe not for every city, but our folks with the Blue Line project staff can help us with any questions.
Thank you.
So we will move on, and hopefully we'll be able to squeeze in the Business Advisory Committee report at a later time in this meeting. And at this point, we'll have a project update. Thank you, Jason. We appreciate your focus on those matters. Project update, I believe Chris Beckwith is going to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I will do a few slides here, and these are slides that you've seen before, so we try to tell you something different each time we present these. So today we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the vision of Blue Line as it fits into the overall metro system. So the Blue Line extension is an important community investment for the Northwest Metro. This transit extension helps fulfill the region's transit vision. One thing I'll say about the timeline of the Blue Line is it is part of the Federal Transit Administration's Capital Investment Grant Program, the New Starts project. And if everything went right on those projects, they take about 7 years to implement. So we right now are in the yellow box, kind of shows the items we're working on right now. Once we complete those, we still have 5 to 6 years of work on this project before we are ready to open this line for revenue service. So it is a long timeline, there are a lot of requirements in the federal process. Importantly, the environmental review is one of those, and we want to do that right, and we want to get the input and make the right decisions. So it takes the time it takes to do the environmental review. So I just wanted to highlight that. The other thing we've changed on this slide, up at the top, there's a box that just reinforces that we are hoping to choose a community-supported route that best meets the project principles and goals. So we're going to tie back to those goals, grounded in community feedback, and that it supports supported by the project corridor communities, such as those around the table and the decision makers. So those are really key to advancing this project. So let's talk a little bit about the metro system. We are learning in our outreach that not everybody realizes that we do have an overall system called the Metro, capital METRO system, in the Twin Cities. This is made up of light rail transit lines that exist and are proposed that are indicated by colors. It includes a bus rapid transit network that is also, some of them are indicated by colors. Sometimes those are on their own dedicated busway. Sometimes they're on highway shoulders, and sometimes they're a combination of those. So those are also indicated by colors. And a few years ago, we also implemented the arterial BRT, bus rapid transit system, that are indicated by letters in this key here. The reason that that was added, it wasn't originally part of the metro system, at least the transitway system, which I'm going to show on this map here. The arterial system was added into this integrated network of LRT and BRT because of the commonalities that exist between all of these modes that are shown here. There's off-board fare collection. It is fast, frequent, all-day service. There are station amenities such as real-time signage, video surveillance that is monitored remotely at the stations for safety. There's fare collections, there's shelter amenities, there's benches, there's lighting, there's heated shelters and things like that. So they have a lot of commonalities. They also are intended to move regionally through the Twin Cities. Now there's also a local bus network and other forms of transit that integrate with this backbone system, the metro system. So we just wanted to highlight that for you. Kind of interesting, we were trying to remember back on, many of us worked on the Central Corridor Green Line, and it was the Central Corridor through at least part of construction, and that's actually when it became the Green Line, and when Hiawatha became the Blue Line. We're thinking probably 2012-ish, 2013, where we changed over and became the color. At the same time, the red line was the Cedar Avenue BRT, became the red line. And then now going forward, when new transitways come onto our network and the Met Council takes these over as the lead agency, they are given transition from a name to a color. So Gold Line was Gateway, Purple Line was Rush Line, and so on. So it's kind of interesting how this has evolved, and we are really trying to implement a vision here, a transitway vision, and Blue Line extension is a big part of that. Now, going on to the schedule information here, we are in the month of March here, doing the Crystal, focusing on Crystal. Next month, we'll be focusing on Robbinsdale. As far as Minneapolis, we are working with the city closely. We actually just had a meeting with the city staff, and we are going to be developing a list of criteria or a list of technical information that the city would like to see before their policymakers are ready to make a decision as far as the preferred route. So we're going to be taking that information back, taking a look at this schedule, and we'll be reporting back hopefully next month on if there's any adjustments needed to this schedule. As far as our outreach and engagement plan, most of these items, we're about halfway through our plan here. We've had a number of open houses, actually all 4 cities now. So we've been in Robbinsdale this week, we've been in Minneapolis, we're doing city council updates as well, and then working through the committee structure. So next month, we'll still focus on Robbinsdale as we work through our project committees. Again, we'll take a look at Minneapolis and kind of see the technical information that's needed to make a decision and see if we need to make any adjustments for the Minneapolis decisions, because there are some pretty significant city decisions within the city of Minneapolis. So more to come on that. That's all I have for a project update, so I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you for that update. Are there any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the environmental update with Kelsey Young.
Thank you. This slide is the same as what you've been presented before, but to recap where we are in our environmental schedule. We are currently preparing the supplemental draft EIS, and that will incorporate information about the anti-displacement work thus far. And when that is published, there will be a public comment period. In the future, there will be the municipal consent process and selecting the preferred route. And then after that, we'll roll into preparing a supplemental final environmental impact statement. And at that stage, that's when mitigation commitments are formalized.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so on the slide, it says it ends November 7th, 2022. Is that a typo, or is that something that already happened? Selected design options in the supplemental draft EIS. That's something that already happened?
Madam Chair, committee members, yes, that first step was associated with our comment period on the notice that went out in the fall that included a description of the design options and alternatives to be evaluated in the supplemental draft EIS. So there was a comment period associated with that, which has concluded for that step.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? You can continue.
Thank you. For today, we are highlighting 2 chapters of the supplemental draft EIS. The first one is Chapter 4, which contains a number of community and social analysis topics. And just to refresh from or recap from our previous meeting, for each of these topics, we look at both short-term impacts during construction and long-term impacts for once the light rail is up and operating. And we also will look at potential or possible mitigation items for consideration. Those get formalized in that supplemental final EIS step in the future. So within Chapter 4, we have information about socio-demographic information about the people living and working along the corridor. There's also a section on land use plan compatibility, where we look at the land use plans, comprehensive plans for the municipalities along the route, as well as Hennepin County, and how the light rail project would interface with those land use planning documents. We also look at community facilities along the corridor, as well as community character and cohesion. We know that this is a topic that we've been hearing a lot about in our outreach as a topic of concern. So we look at both, access to community facilities along the corridor, as well as how the introduction and construction of the project would potentially impact the character of the community. This chapter also includes information about property acquisitions. So that includes both the impacts to the property owners, both residents and businesses, as well as renters or tenants of those properties, and would also look at residents or businesses that would need to be relocated as part of the project. So all within that one section, and all of these topics, we look at all of the options under consideration and compare to a no-build option. Continuing on with Chapter 4 topics, that also includes cultural resources, so historic properties that relate to our Section 106 process. More to come on that process as that kicks off here, or continues on, rather, this spring. We also include information about visual and aesthetic impacts, and particularly looking at the lens of people's visual experience as they're within the project corridor, and particularly people living along the corridor, since they experience that visual aspect on a daily basis. We also look at economic effects. This section is more geared towards the jobs and cost influx of the project and the construction activity, but other business-related impacts are more woven throughout the chapter and the SDIS document. And then this chapter lastly includes a section on safety and security. We know that this is also a topic of a lot of concern of the community, And we look at both safety and security related policies, such as what Metro Transit is doing in a broader scale sense, as well as how the project infrastructure would have an impact on safety and security for people, accessing at stations or traveling through the corridor, in vehicles, bicycles and pedestrians interacting with the light rail system itself.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you
On
may.
chapter 4, so for this chapter, community and social analysis, does it include any review of ridership currently, or like what prospective ridership will look like? Is that part of this with the community and social piece?
Madam Chair and committee members, ridership is addressed under a different chapter that covers transportation-related topics, but there is a transit section that would include ridership estimates.
Sure, go ahead, Ricardo, and then Commissioner Green.
Thank you. Hello. I'm just curious, what information are we using to conduct this analysis? Is it like from what year or what studies are being used to do this work? Sorry if that's too basic, but I'm just trying to understand what are you comparing it to, or what information is like brand new, what information comes from a report from the census, like just trying to understand. Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair, committee members, the demographic information is primarily relying on census data, as well as both the each decade we do the census, as well as the American Community Survey. And then we also add to that or supplement it with any information we might be hearing through our outreach about how people identify. If we are hearing things that just raw data might not reflect, we can have narrative that would reflect that as well, if we are getting that type of information.
And just to add, the chapter 4, we can assume that's 95% completed in the Brooklyns, for the Brooklyns, but that chapter 4 in Minneapolis, it's starting more from 0, or?
Madam Chair, committee members, that's a great question. For the northern portion of the project corridor, the current phase of the Blue Line Extension project more closely aligns with what was studied previously in the earlier phase of Blue Line Extension and covered in the final environmental impact statement and record of decision. So for that portion, it's more of an update of information. There are some details about the project that have changed, but that's correct. It's much of that analysis is very similar to what had previously been looked at, whereas other portions of the corridor where we're on new alignment or shifted alignment and looking at multiple options in Minneapolis, there's more new analysis being completed, essentially.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Green?
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask a clarifying question, actually, about your question. You asked about ridership information, and I wondered, did you mean numbers, or were you asking about socio-demographic information of riders?
I was thinking of numbers, but both are relevant, for sure. And I don't know. Do they both get addressed in the transportation piece?
Well, the piece within Chapter 4 about demographic background is more the people living along the corridor. And then the piece about ridership estimates would be in the transportation section under transit, estimating future ridership.
And so just to clarify, there is there socio-demographic information about ridership in that later piece?
So who our riders are.
I think I can answer that question. Metro Transit does collect ridership information related to the Blue Line Extension project, as well as other public vehicles that are utilized by customers. So that information is always captured. Commissioner Lundy, did you have a question?
2 quick points. Just one is, when you say, I'm assuming you'll update everything, I know it's gonna shift, and the only reason I bring it up is we had a building that was 50 meters outside the half-mile radius, and therefore couldn't use a federal grant. So I'm sensitive to that in Crystal and Robbinsdale, that little shift a little bit. Actually, in Brooklyn Park, we couldn't offer services to a business group because they were actually outside the borders of a grant. The grant is determined by the thing. So I'm assuming all that gets updated, and I only mention it because it was literally 50 meters. We had to map it out, and we had to tell them, no, we couldn't assist them because the feds say a half a mile and no more. And the second one is just, will those transportation numbers, will that also identify people who are transit dependent? Because some people don't have vehicles. I know in certain parts in Brooklyn Park and like by the Starlight stop within a certain area, there was 20 to 22% of people did not have access to reliable transportation. So some of that was really important about people's dependency. It's not whether they were gonna ride or not, it's the fact that some people had no other choice than to ride transit. And so that's a little different factor, and I'm hoping that comes out somewhere because that's a good number to know.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, and transit dependency is also a criteria that is looked at and tracked with Metro Transit. Yes, go ahead,
One more
Commissioner.
comment. Commissioner Lundy reminded me, since we're moving from existing and we're shifting, right, we are revising something existing. And so I feel it's important to restate that there are transit connections, other expectations that came with the previous alignment that I'm hopeful get addressed. You know, the C line, for example, those stations are not quite I think that they were like technically temporary. They're not the stations that are meant to be with the C line. But they were placed like that because the blue line alignment extension alignment was originally going to be there. So the request is, I think this is kind of connecting to Commissioner Lundy's, as that revision is occurring, just really making sure we're looking and aren't, inadvertently marginalizing a priority that we've promised.
Great point, thank you. Mayor
That's right.
Adams, yes.
Yes. Sorry, I'll get it to stand up better. Kind of in a relationship to the transit piece, I'm kind of wondering if there's some way to measure those who are dependent on transit and are actually avoiding transit. Is that going to be measured? I have a certain class of people that I know who are doing their best to avoid it right now because of the safety issues. Is there going to be a way to measure what that piece is, or any improvement within that realm? Thanks, Madam Chair.
Chris or Nick?
Chair, I think that's a great question. We're hearing something. I think we'll have to think about what the data sources we have and how we could measure that. But I think we'll have to take that back and report back. It's a very relevant question, so.
Okay. Thank you. May I follow up?
Sure.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I do work in my professional life with a lot of people who are coming out of recovery. They're definitely dependent on that. So I've got a lot of people within my organization who are doing their best because of some of the I would say, triggers that they experience on the transit system. So I want you guys to be mindful of that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you're welcome, thank you. Any other comments or questions? You can proceed.
Thank you. Okay, the next chapter that we're highlighting today is Chapter 5, Physical and Environmental Analysis. This includes a number of topics that you may think of when you hear the word environmental. The first section is utilities, so that includes both public and private utilities. And for the supplemental draft EIS step, that will be preliminary information that will then need to, as with much of this information, that will need to get finalized for the supplemental final EIS stage. So preliminary information. The floodplain section and wetlands look at the natural environment and how, for floodplains, how how the project would interact with locations where there are, formalized boundaries of where floodplain water is accommodated. So specific regulations in that topic area. In the topic of wetlands, we look at areas that are formally defined as wetland areas, and this is a topic that relates to our coordination with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There's a formalized permitting process that the previous phase of the project had been engaging with, and so we'll be updating that information and working with them, as well as local jurisdictions that govern wetlands. We also look at geology, soils, and topography, knowing that relates to both our management of the natural environment as we're building the project, but also can relate to project design and engineering. We also look at hazardous materials and contamination. In much of the corridor, there's past land uses that have mean that there's contamination present that will need to be managed as part of the project. Chapter 5 also includes noise and vibration. We know that we've been hearing lots of concern and questions around the topic of noise in particular. Both of these topics start with looking at sensitive properties such as residences or where people sleep, but we also look at sensitive businesses or other locations. Places of worship is also another one. And we compare how the project would change from existing noise levels. And then in the supplemental draft EIS stage, we look at possible mitigation options that then would get finalized in the next phase of environmental review. We also include an analysis of the biological environment, so protected species, and preliminary information about how the project would work with any restrictions or considerations related to wildlife habitat. That primarily applies to the northern portion of the corridor. We also look at water quality and stormwater that relates into the project's design and permitting. And then we also perform an analysis of air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and energy, how all of those topics would potentially change as part of the project and comparing our options. That brings us to the end of the environmental topics here. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kelsey, for that environmental update. We will continue to look to your team for updates on project impacts to the diverse and dynamic communities along the Metro Blue Line Extension alignment, and how these impacts are being addressed and mitigated as the environmental analysis advances. And I'd like to comment that I'm very happy to see that your presentation about the community and social analysis impacts ties into that. I think this corridor project has taken the deepest dive in considering the community and social impacts, and as well as the anti-displacement effort. So it's really good to be seeing how this project is advancing to support communities. Mayor Adams.
Yes, I have a question on Chapter 5. When we do the analysis on noise, that's looking at the noise from the light rail perspective. Is there going to be any analysis from any displaced road traffic in the noise related to that?
Displaced road traffic?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, Kelsey, if you have an answer.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, there's modeling that accounts for, looks at all of the factors that would change as part of the project. So we would consider, major changes in roadway traffic too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question
Jason.
on noise? Just because it comes up a lot in the community meetings and the community feedback around the response to noise is generally that the trains themselves will be quieter than the road traffic that surrounds it. However, at the stations, that, where you hear alerts and that there tends to be more noise. So I'm wondering, does that get broken out? Is that distinct so that it isn't just the trains themselves, but also the stations?
All of that is built into the modeling.
Okay,
yes.
perfect.
So
Thank you.
both the light rail traveling on the tracks as well as the bells coming in and out of stations, for example.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we will move on to Crystal Design Decisions with Nick Landwehr and Nikango Sigala. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
Madam Chair, I see Pastor Dan has joined us now, so
Oh, sure.
do we want to do the BAC update?
Let me ask if he's ready, if you're prepared to give your BAC report, or if you want to wait till a little bit later.
Why don't I wait till we do the next topic, because I think some of my comments might fit in with that next topic.
Awesome.
So thanks, Nick.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon. We are, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, this is the month that we are focusing on Crystal and the design decisions and what we're going to start working on to incorporate into the supplemental DIS in Crystal. So the slide here is, we saw this last month with Brooklyn Park. These are the design principles that help guide us with the design decisions and work that we do. And at this point, we're informing the design work we're doing informs that supplemental DIS. So this is a little bit of a breakaway, or just step aside and take a look at a question that we had last month about, what is in our different percentages of design and how it progresses. So the graphics here kind of show, how those lay out, from 30% where it's a very rough sketch to look at and starts filling in more at 60%. And then as you get to 90%, it starts looking like a completed bowl. So the example here is a Picasso drawing. And
We are building a Picasso.
yeah, we're gonna build a Picasso. So, what I'd like to remind folks right now, we are pre-30%. We are more at a conceptual preliminary layout design to inform what would go into an environmental study. So, the work that we're doing now is more, I would characterize as two-dimensional to show how things will fit in. We do look at elevations where in key points, but it's very plan view, two-dimensional to show, and very conservative to show what impacts, how a light rail alignment, how the roadway fits, guideway fits, sidewalks, how we get folks to where stations would be, and how they fit within context of that community. So very, very high level, very, very schematic. I would characterize more where we're at now is maybe around 10% design. So as we work through our draft environmental and start focusing more on what the alignments are going to be, our designs does start to become more informed. So 30% design plans. This really starts defining those major scope elements of the project, the roadway alignment, the track alignment, the guideway plans. And we start looking at not just two-dimensional, we start informing it, the three-dimensional elevations of how it fits within the world. And we start developing those profiles and cross-sections. And we start looking at the structures and typical details that would go into that plan set. We start, our bridges now, we identify where there's a bridge. We start really looking at how that bridge would fit, where the abutments are, and things like that, where retaining wall locations would be, station park and ride locations, and start looking at not just a block, but how we would configure that park and ride, and how you would enter and exit it, and how the levels work and how it operates. And then construction limits and right of way, we start to inform a little bit, get a better picture of what that is in 30% design. So that is the next year that we're working on with the project, is the 30% design. And then it starts as we get more and more refining those scope elements. For instance, at 30%, we're looking at where the retaining walls are. At 60%, we're looking at the details within that, what the rebar plan is, what kind of structure, what do the footings look like? So we really start digging down into that. In the 60% plans also, we'll start, we'll be identifying stakeholder concerns all the way along. We start to inform them quite a bit more at 60% and make sure that we're catching utility updates, utility work that we need to do and how that's coordinated. And then as 90% plans come in, those are very detailed. Those are where we start putting the dialogue boxes in to tell a contractor exactly how you build it, the step-by-step instructions on that. So it's very detailed. Stepping backwards, I think one of the key things, like in a 60% plan, is folks are always very interested in how we're going to finish the project, especially green space and stuff. That usually happens around 60%. 30% we're working on roadway and key elements. 60% is when we start figuring out, green space, how we're going to plant things, where lighting goes, how much lighting, what it looks like, what the designs are.
That's very interesting. I really like this design progression. I think it's very useful to have that visual of the process and what to expect to be completed. And there's so much that has to be done at that 30% level in terms of community engagement, in terms of just getting the scope elements and all of the criteria. So to see this and hear people's concerns that, oh, this is already decided, this gives a better picture, I think, of how things progress. You can continue.
Thank you. So moving back to Crystal and focusing on that, again, in your packet, we have a handout here of our design decisions document for Crystal. And as all of our committees, these will be draft as we work through it because it's a working document. But again, it documents our key decision-making phases, the engagement plan, the list of the decisions we're doing, the community input we get, the environmental considerations that we're looking at, the stakeholder input, and then any outstanding issues and questions that we have in design. So this is helping us with the design, tracking what we're doing, documenting it, and able to give this to our environmental team for the draft environmental impact statement, but then it'll also be a live document that will continue through with our design to keep tracking those outstanding issues and making sure that we address them as we're going forward. So in Crystal, this is continuation on from Brooklyn Park where we left off last time at 63rd Avenue Station. So 63rd Avenue Station, although it's in Brooklyn Park, really does serve the north end of Crystal also. So, but it is similar in context to, say, Bass Lake Road, where it's LRT alignment, runs center running at grade along County Road 81. And then in County Road 81 in this section, we have those stations identified at 63rd Avenue Station next to the current park and ride and at grade. And then Bass Lake Road, and we're looking at those station designs and access. So at Bass Lake Road, we've analyzed two options at County Road 81 and Bass Lake for a station. The reason we were looking at that is as we were looking at County Road 81 in Crystal, it's a 6-lane highway. At this point right now, we're looking at, what capacity do we need to do there for vehicle traffic and for light rail. So, and we were looking at a 4-lane section through Crystal, but that has the capacity to handle vehicle traffic through there, except when you get to the stations like at Bass Lake Road, and then farther south, the southbound access from County Road 81 down to Highway 100. So our next decisions, what we're looking at is Bass Lake Road. How can we accommodate that intersection to keep the vehicle capacity in the roadway, but also handle light rail transit? So we looked at two different options here. So this graphic or the photo that we show here is looking northbound up at Bass Lake Road intersection. So we're looking north as County Road 81 runs up and down through the screen, and then across is the Bass Lake Road intersection. As I said before, we're studying that traffic capacity and the intersection, and we identified those key points where we had pinch points at Bass Lake Road and down at Highway 100. And we also want to look at how we refine this station design in this area. We're looking at a station at Bass Lake Road. So a couple options that we've come up with to evaluate was an at-grade section. So again, the capacity at these intersections was an issue if we narrowed it down to 4 lanes. So if we kept it at grade, we understand that we would need to continue the intersection similar to what it is today with 6 lanes through there and the turning movements. And keeping the station at grade, center running, this is what it will look like. So this graphic here you see is basically over Bass Lake Road, looking south at station platform with the blue roofs in there and the lane configurations on either side. Access to this station platform would be both at grade at the intersection, so you see the crosswalks at the bottom of the screen there, and then we evaluated we need 2 points of access for safety on the station for ingress and egress. And what's showing there on the upper side of the screen is a pedestrian bridge that crosses over 81 but offers access at the station with a vertical circulation tower that would include elevators and stairs. And then you see on the outside, on the left-hand side, we show a switchback ramp to get up to that pedestrian bridge. On the right-hand side, we show a spiral ramp that gets to the bridge also. One of the key things on a bridge in this location, County Road 81, is a moving route. So we need additional clearance for there. Typically a bridge clearance is about 18 feet. We need to be up about 24 feet of clearance there to accommodate the moving route. So it really brings that bridge up, which means those ramps become longer to get up to that distance.
What is the speed of the highway at this point?
Currently coming into the intersection, we're at 45 miles an hour. On the north side, it's 55.
I have a question about the parking. Is that the park and ride on the right-hand upper corner or no? Is that where people are going to park?
Yes, Madam Chair. We show a park and ride here in that corner. It's approximately about 170 stalls. This is similar to in our previous design when we were in the railroad alignment. We had a park and ride in the same location, about that same size.
Okay, so I'm curious as to why the cars are so far away from the platform and not more in the center of the design.
Madam Chair, for the parking lot, you mean, or for the
Yes,
parking
for
ride?
parking.
Yes, it has to do with space. So what you can see is right in front of that park and ride, there is a cell phone tower there.
Oh,
So we're working around that, and this. So I have a better layout and a couple screens here that show a plan view where it really narrows down as you get to Bass Lake Road, the available area. So that area shows where we could fit the park and ride in, have the access in. As we start getting farther, that cell phone tower really does limit where we can go to.
Okay. Was there a question? No? Okay.
So one of the key things is we looked at these intersections and how they operate, the potential operation here is the safety considerations. And this graphic really helps to visualize that. We looked at conflict types. So the conflicts are, where you could have a vehicle-to-vehicle conflict or, pedestrians crossing the road in front of a traffic lane. That would be considered a conflict. So the different conflict types that we evaluated are the crossing conflicts. So those are really for vehicles. That's the open circles on there. And there's, in this configuration at grade, this is similar to what it is today. This just shows the light rail in here in the middle, but the intersection itself operates as it is today. So there's 68 crossing conflicts in this map with vehicles. Merging conflicts where, if you're taking a right turn on and have a conflict with the through lanes of traffic, those are shown in that half circle area. And about 11 merging conflicts, and then pedestrian conflicts. This is a key for us as we look at station platforms, getting folks to the station safely across the intersections. Those are shown in the diamond, and we have 31 pedestrian conflicts in here. So this really kind of shows the existing condition, but also at grade with the station in this area, what those safety concerns or conflicts would be.
Well, that's really complicated, and I can see that the engineers have been very busy.
There's a few more slides here. You can show a comparison with our other option that we're going to evaluate. One last thing to talk about here is just pedestrian, how the pedestrians are going to get across the roadway, how they would get to the station. And in this case, we're showing that at-grade intersection. So this is a plan view of station in the yellow in the center. The crossing of the roadway at the intersection, and then we show the pedestrian bridge going up. So that's kind of that dashed greenish yellowish that hits the station on the right-hand side here. And as we evaluate it, obviously with those long switchback ramps to get up and across, it really starts extending the distance of a crossing there to get people across. And, you know, as opposed to crossing the intersection and waiting for arrows, which would be under 3 minutes, you know, taking a pedestrian bridge across here because of the distance ends up becoming an about 8-minute crossing to get from one side to the other.
I've got a question, Nick, thanks. So if a person wanted to be at grade level from their car or to their car, they would have to get off the platform and then cross over and then go up to the park and ride, right?
Yes, Madam Chair. So yes,
How much
if they
time
were
does that
to
take?
use the intersection to cross, if you follow from the park and ride, where the park and ride gray triangle starts coming together, there's that white line through there. That would be the pedestrian bike access through the trail sidewalk in there. And you would have to follow that alignment to the intersection and then cross to the intersection to stay at grade in the location.
Did you time that walk?
Madam Chair, we don't have that distance, but we could find it. We can bring it back.
I'm only thinking about that because I know how cold it gets in the wintertime and every minute counts, so. I'm sorry, go ahead. Commissioner Fernando?
And so the 8 minutes is for the full, what's the 8 minutes?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, the 8 minutes is if you were to be crossing at Bass Lake Road area where the bridge starts, so on the north side where the switchback ramps are.
Up there.
If you were to start there and go all the way up over the bridge, come back down that spiral.
Okay.
And back to the intersection, that'd be about an 8-minute crossing.
The reason I bring it up is from a transit riding perspective, it would only just, because you can access it from the middle, right, I'm assuming?
At the station, yes.
Right, so from a station utility standpoint, it wouldn't be 8 minutes, you know, because I'm hypothetically in the station and then I'm choosing a direction. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm understanding the slide
That's
correctly.
correct.
Okay.
You could assume that the station would be roughly half. So
Right.
So from one side to the station would be about 4 minutes.
So yeah, so I think from a transit user standpoint, you know, 4 minutes is half. That's pretty significant in terms of that's just not that much time if you're already using transit. That's kind of what it takes to access a station.
So Madam
Madam
Chair
Chair.
and Commissioner, we also, so the pedestrian bridge in this location serves two purposes. It does serve as a option for access to the station, but it's also proposed all the way across, not just from the park and ride, to serve as a way to cross Highway 81 without having to cross at the traffic signal. And
Yeah,
to go this way as
absolutely.
well. So
Yeah, and
that's why
I
it's-
understand. I think I understood that. I just wanted to make sure that I was counting the right minutes from the station, and then, you know, of course, you all would have to follow all of the ADA guidelines and whatnot. But just from a comfort standpoint, making sure that all mobility levels feel comfortable and safe getting all the way across, which I know is always a consideration, but since we're talking about it. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Sure, Councilmember Kaiser, then Pacheco, anybody else I missed? Okay.
2 questions. The white is the bike path, right? The white on each side of 81 there, the white line stripe?
Yep, Chair,
Okay.
Council Member. So yes, that, on this map, the pavement is in gray, so the road lanes are gray. The white that you see on either side of the road or around the park and ride is a sidewalk or trail continuation. On the north side is actually, Crystal Lake Trail. Crystal
Okay.
Lake Regional Trail.
And so people could access the station from, what is the left side or the north side? Like crossing at grade level on the road? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Pacheco,
Madam
Councilmember.
Chair, I was just looking at one of the response, because why we were kind of further away was there was a cell phone tower. Is that difficult, is that difficult to keep something in line here for a tower?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, yes, we typically try to avoid cell phone towers because that infrastructure is hard to relocate, and I know it's there's a lot of infrastructure going into it, and it is also a revenue source.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Mr.
Councilmember
Solar.
and Councilmember, the other reason, as Nick had kind of stated before, as you can see, those are at an angle, so it starts to come closer together. The county actually, that most of that property between the railroad, until you get into the private uses to the north or to the south, most of that is county property. We're not gonna widen toward the railroad side, that I can guarantee you. And so, as you bring those together closer, it gets harder to make it work as a parking lot as well, once you start to bring them closer.
Dan, are you saying that railroad's not flexible?
I'm gonna assume we probably aren't gonna use the railroad.
Just want to make sure I understood, sorry.
So further on, as you see that park and ride, and as you get to the left-hand side of it, that's probably about as narrow as you can start getting to keep circulation and parking stalls on that side.
Okay, thanks. If there's no further questions, you can continue.
So the next option that we looked at here is a grade separated interchange. So what is shown here in this graphic is looking north towards Bass Lake Road. That's going through the screen. The up and down is County Road 81. So this is what would be referred to as a tight diamond interchange here. So the through lanes of County Road 81 would go up and over the intersection, so they would not have to stop at that intersection. So that helps the traffic volumes there. You get the through lanes of traffic through, and then whether you're coming on or off of that interchange down to Bass Lake Road, that would be at great intersections. So what's showing in here in between those two bridge structures is the station platform in between them. We can keep the station and the light rail at grade through here. And it does quite a few things. It offers a better access for pedestrians to get to that station. You're not having to cross that higher speed, higher volume roads of the through lanes on 81. If you're at the intersection, and I have some better graphics here, but on the south end of that station, towards the bottom of the screen, you can see that trail in the white. You can cross underneath this structure, get to the station, or go all the way across without having to cross the traffic lanes here. So a much more convenient way to get to the station, convenient from the park and ride that you can see there to get to that station, but also to get across. And it's kind of in the shadow on the right-hand side, but that is the Crystal Lake Regional Trail there too. So it makes a very good connection for trail infrastructure.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
Councilmember.
thanks, Madam Chair. Nick, you used a term to describe this type of station or approach when you first introduced it, and I just didn't catch it. It was
Tight diamond.
Tight diamond.
tight diamond. Okay, I thought you said a name. Okay, thank you. Tight diamond. Oh, sure.
Any other questions?
I know this is-
Councilmember Wagner and then Kaiser.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious what the thinking was behind like elevating the roadway versus elevating the station. Is it to keep pedestrians at grade, or I don't know if there's any context with that?
Chair, committee members, I think one of the best ways to describe it is to address the intersection issues that we had with capacity by taking 81 out of that intersection, so if we elevate that over there, that solves our traffic capacity issues. Basically, County Road 81 never would have a delay. They're not at that intersection. They're not delaying that intersection. So we take that heavier through movement out. So that puts that up and gets it out of the intersection. And then keeping the station down at grade is always, the preferred method to do it. So it's easier access for all mobilities. We don't have to go up over rely on elevators in those locations. So, we prefer to evaluate that. So it offers a cleaner, safer, better pedestrian access to the station and across the intersections.
Dick, I might add, the other one, all the pedestrians have to go up, cross, come down, down, down. Here, what's going up and over are people in cars that are already driving, and so they're not noticing any transition, but to go on over, that's the highest of all volumes, either east-west or turning or anywhere is north-south traffic. So that gets to move uninhibited, and then turning movements and pedestrian access and things like that, which are done at much slower speed, are done at grade. And when Nick puts his next slide up there about the conflicts, you'll see that gets to be part of it as well.
Councilmember Kaiser.
Thank you. I know this is preliminary, but is there any kind of rough idea of the, how much more this would cost than at the elevated with the pedestrian bridge? Is this exponentially more expensive, or?
Chair, council members, yes, it is a more expensive option, but this is one where you weigh out the benefits of the safety and capacity and flow there with the cost of the infrastructure. And we're working on pulling together cost estimates for that. We don't have that specifically.
I understand. I just wondering if it's a ballpark, if this is twice as expensive as the Ped Bridge, or is it, in the whole scheme of things, not that much more, considering how much, this is just a small part of this 13-mile. That just came up at a council meeting when the last time we were discussing it, that elevating 81 would be a lot more expensive. To me, that makes the most sense of all the designs we've looked at for a couple of years now, but I just thought I'd ask. I understand it's preliminary.
Yeah. So as far as magnitude, I can't tell you if that's twice or three times, but yes, it is more magnitude. I think, as you said, just the cost. We have to think about operational costs, maintenance costs, but also I think the bigger thing is safety and vehicle operations. So there, it really does make a safer environment here.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Adams, did you have a question?
Yes, I got a couple things. Cost, obviously, was one of them that I was interested in. Thank you for that question. The visual division is something that I think in this one is, it really changes the, I guess, I don't know, the community in that area. It's much more divided than, you can't see across. And then noise, goes to why I asked the noise question. Are we going to be able to measure that noise as it's elevated as well? How much different is it than elevating the light rail? So there's that, and then there's the safety issues of around the station being kind of in its own little world, kind of divided. And I think the thing that this doesn't capture is just beyond, well, actually, right there, I guess, on the right side, these are residences, and there's single-family houses on the lower right corner, just on the other side of that building. So that impact, I think, becomes real fast. So that's something I want you guys to think about and consider in this option.
Thank you. Good points. I have a question about that as well. Underneath the bridge, obviously you can see from the shadows during the daytime that it's dark. And I don't know what the design elements would be at the 60 and 90% percentage completion points. But As far as, lighting and safety, obviously those considerations would be there, and whether or not there needed to be additional, like, barriers, just so that it doesn't end up being a hangout space or whatever it is, so that people could move from the platform very easily to their car, and it feels comfortable, it looks good, it's well lit. Or perhaps there needs to be another alternative for folks along the way. If on the southern portion, perhaps there could be a way for them, to walk where, like right after the, it's kind of hard to describe, but I see a pole right there in the middle where the sidewalk goes to the parking lot. Like if you could keep straight and then walk in, that might be more comfortable. It really needs to be looked at, I think, from the standpoint of safety and design. But I'll stop there, but just something to think about.
Thank you, Chair. And those are key elements that the city has expressed their concern with that. So as we develop the design, we want to make sure that, that it is safe, it's inviting, but it's not a nuisance environment. So we want to make sure it's well lit. We want to make sure that it's open, so there's not the shadowy, dark hiding spots on there. And so what's hard to see in this graphic, we do have some other graphic or concepts designed up as you can look through there. Try to keep that area under the bridge open for the access, so it's clear, wide open, well lit in the day and at nighttime too.
Can I ask one more question? Thanks. I know the Southwest line has a lot of bridges. Isn't that true, that they're building now? Were there similar concerns raised about the safety of people in the area and the darkness under the bridges? Was that ever, or,
Madam Chair, I didn't work a lot on the Southwest
Okay.
design, but they have at Lake Street bridges up, and there's a station down below there. I mean, there are a number of areas where it gets a little bit closer, and of course, safety, both making it safe and comfortable for patrons, but yet not making it so inviting for people to hang out, has to be a design choice that has to be taken into account. We'll work with law enforcement. I know we've already talked to the chief and Crystal, and so we'll work with both local law enforcement and Met Council law enforcement. We'll work with other safety standards and, to try to develop, something that's lit and easy. Because structures can help provide barriers from things like through traffic, but also provide different challenges as well.
well, Crystal or this design will get the benefit of being later than the Southwest line, so any problems with bridges, you guys are gonna already address, right?
I mean, we will take it. We're learning lessons every day. We always do.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Lundy?
Just wanted to cover that, part of the station area design process, the county board has really asked to take a different look at how we do things. Americans tend to make it a cement palace, where we put cement everywhere. It looks very utilitarian. If you go to other places around the world, Europe, Asia, they actually make it much more inviting. And typically when things are more inviting, you have people with a purpose there, not people without a purpose. When you make it look like a cement factory, you tend to get people without a purpose who are hanging out there. But when you make it like Nashville has outdoor instruments where kids play with instruments while they're waiting for the trains, suddenly it's not just, I'm here to get on a train, it becomes something else. And so I think the board, got two of my fellow members here, we said we want to take a different look at this and try to learn from some of those mistakes, but also look not just outside the US, because frankly, we build these really cool and ugly things that no one likes. Take a different look and maybe make different stops reflect. So rather than look at this as an opportunity for unsafe activity, I would ask Crystal to look at, what do you want this to look like so people know they're at the Crystal stop? Not, I don't need to look at a sign, I actually know this is Crystal. North Memorial would be something that might be hospital focused. By the Capri Theater might be something focused on the Capri Theater, so it's less about fearing what could be there and talking about what could be there and asking people to envision, what do you want people who get off at the Crystal stop? And look at the Crystal people, that they get off and they now, this is Crystal. What's your story? Somebody gets off, this rail for the first time from the airport, what's the story that they see? And that's what I think is a different way of looking at things, is there's an opportunity for you guys to tell your story on this stop. And I look at that as just a positive thing.
Wonderful points, thank you. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Thank you. I guess just to build on that, a quick question, but yeah, I'm also like seeing an opportunity, and I see that in the station decisions document, there's community input listed. I personally believe it will be great to also see some of the outcomes of the anti-displacement working group that could live here, as some of the recommendations pertain to what Commissioner Lundy was describing, which is how can we preserve culture or celebrate the culture that already exists across the corridor. And yeah, I also see the bridge in the Brooklyns, like long stretches of infrastructure. How can that help small businesses? Thinking not only of before surviving construction, but thriving after. So again, in conclusion, it will be wonderful that in every document for every city, we see a summary of the anti-displacement outcomes of each of those cities that could help impact, or whether it's the design of the stations or just some of the other issues that impact those.
Thank you. One more comment from Mayor Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think to the design on both at grade as well as the interchange, that interface is missing a little bit. We've spent roughly $6 million in that area, in the business area and in the parks recently when we had the other design there to help prepare for the station to come. And when you look at where the station interfaces, it does not interface with the park that was just redone. It's not interfacing with the community businesses there. That is definitely some of our most diverse areas in terms of business owners, and that we're missing it. We're absolutely missing it. I don't know
would
what that
agree.
looks like.
And I've been to that park. It's absolutely gorgeous, beautiful. The walking is amazing, and I like the squishy parts of the play yard and the path. The investment is still there, but I definitely, how can we connect those investments is good.
So, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
There's also pickleball there.
Oh, pickleball too, okay. So, Dan.
So, Madam Chair and Mayor, so that linkage, I think, is something that we talk a lot here about the project staff and what the project work is doing. Ricardo talked about the anti-displacement work. I also want to bring up that we have, of course, a renewed station area planning consultant for the Crystal stop, Damon Farber, that we have a contract with to help provide exactly, Mayor, some of those kind of things that are there. How can we link, how can we make sure that throughout, a lot of the things you talked about, Mayor, were things that were linked from the previous station area planning work that was done around the Bass Lake Road Station. Well, we now have a new contract there that the county and the project team is working with, as well as with the city of Crystal. I know I've been more active with the Robbinsdale station area planning contract, but as we work with the Crystal station area planning, how does both recently new development, opportunity for future development, and park impacts, how does that all connect to the station as well?
Madam Chair, may I respond?
You sure may.
Yeah, and again, I'll just reemphasize the backstop to that the whole station is a rail line. And that's the interface that we're missing. So both proposals here are showing us the only possible interface is with the rail. And
Fair enough.
that's kind of why we're bringing it up as a concern.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you,
Very,
Madam Chair.
very good points. I'd like for us to continue and wrap up the presentation.
Okay. Madam Chair, so This is another graphic to compare, again, that same safety considerations with conflict points here. And you can see with the where we pull the through lanes of traffic out of the mix of that intersection, it drastically reduces those crossing conflicts down from 68 to about 20. The merging conflicts are reduced down to 8, and the pedestrian conflicts also are reduced with this because we take those through lanes of traffic out of there. So this kind of outlines that pedestrian safety and vehicle safety through the intersection and how it can be improved. This is the similar graphic we talked about, the walk time. So this is with the interchange, pretty much the same connection you would have on that south end of the station, or what would be on the right-hand side here, where there was a bridge before and we were at about 8 minutes to cross. That same pathway across through the station and over to the park and ride area is about 3 minutes, which is roughly going to be the same time it would take to walk across the intersection also if you're waiting for lights. So very comparable there. So, you know, I believe that time difference right there would encourage more folks to use that safer crossing there, because you're able to stay at grade. If you're coming across, you're coming off the trail on either side, and your only crossing would be on the railroad tracks and no roadway crossings.
Madam Chair, committee members, our outreach activities and engagement with Crystal communities continue to produce positive results. We are seeing increased attendance at our community gatherings. We are also striking even more conversations with the business community. The most recent meeting we had was the February 27 open house. In terms of feedback, what we've heard is mainly related to safety, pedestrian crossing the roadway, safety on the train, and also in the neighborhood as it relates to noise, maybe a barrier to kind of shield that a little bit. As Councilmember Wagner alluded to, we also had a question about elevating the light rail infrastructure instead. And again, we also received comments of some community members who are not very much in favor of the project. This is very consistent with what we have heard in the past. Typically, safety, pedestrian crossing the roadway as it relates to traffic along County Road 81. And again, crossing Bass Lake Road, pedestrian safety again, and also in terms of the design decisions that need to be made in Crystal, comparing to the interchange option and upgrade option. What we heard was that most of the community members who had attended the meeting had preferred the interchange option, and we're continuing to make ourselves available. Outreach coordinators are looking forward to attend various community meetings and make ourselves available to the community as needed. That concludes it. If I have questions for me.
Questions? Thank you so much, Nkanga. Okay, so we will move on to, where are we? We're going to have the anti-displacement working group, but I think this would be a good time to have the BAC update.
I think what I had to share might fit well with the conversation that's about to happen with the anti-displacement work group, and maybe I could best summarize the concerns or fears that were voiced at the last BAC meeting. Kind of revolved around those businesses and those that are on that street where the light rail's coming through. It was emphasized that they rely on street parking now for folks to visit their organization or their retail store or whatnot. And that's kind of alarming for them. And one could argue, well, there's other places to park in the neighborhoods behind that main thoroughfare, but what about parking in general for those neighborhoods, including not only commuters, but also folks who live there? And I think there was a call for, let's study that too. And I think that best summarizes the concerns that were voiced at the most recent meeting.
Thank you so much. Any questions? I think we have a couple minutes to back up a little bit and talk about Robbinsdale and Minneapolis.
So Chair, this is just a preview of what's to come here. So next month is Robbinsdale month. And so there's a couple, a few more decisions that we need to work through there. Downtown LRT station location. If there's park and ride, where the location of that park and ride is and how you incorporate the transit connections into that park and ride. Next slide is, and then in May, we get to Minneapolis and look at the design decisions and a few more there where we have the from Target Field Station to West Broadway options, whether Lyndale or the East of 94 options to look at as we get up to West Broadway and 21st or West Broadway between Lyndale and Irving. Do we keep everything on West Broadway or do we use 21st for light rail in that area? Other thing is the number of stations and locations in Minneapolis, and then focus in on the Penn Avenue Station location.
Thank you. I think this is a good time to acknowledge that we did get some feedback from the West Broadway Business Coalition, and we've received that letter and are reviewing that and including it in our community feedback and comments. Anti-displacement update.
Thank you, Chair. So a simple update today. As we put our anti-displacement working group in place now a little bit over a year ago, the work of that group, the phase one work of that group has been completed. We've had the 4 and then eventually 5 Saturday workshops with the group where the anti-displacement working group, supported by staff from our local agencies, has talked about past impacts on projects, has talked about residential displacement and residential impacts, commercial and commercial impacts, as Ricardo mentioned earlier, cultural and cultural displacement possibilities and impacts. And so that work has gone on and has been gathered together by our team and by Cura, our consultant helping us with this group, to now turn all of that feedback and all of that discussion at those meetings into a recommended set of policies to bring forward there. The kind of structure will be kind of laying out outcomes that the anti-displacement work group has want to see, and then policies that could be implemented that would lead to those outcomes. So those outcomes may be stability in commercial property rates, leaving in place cultural activities and cultural pieces that are in place, outcomes of support during construction and making sure that businesses can survive during construction. And then the policies that lead to that will not only identify possible policies, talk a little bit about where they have or haven't worked in other areas, what some of the costs associated with implementing those policies might be, a little bit about who and how those policies get implemented. Timing being one. I'll credit my friend Ricardo with talking about preparing, surviving, and thriving. So policies that may help to prepare businesses and residents for construction, policies that will help during construction, surviving, and then really big, we're learning also about following Central Corridor following the green line, how do we continue to help businesses thrive now that they've been through this businesses, residences, neighborhoods, community organizations, churches, all of those things. How do we allow those to thrive in the community now that light rail has been constructed and put in place? So that is where this report will be going. That is what will happen. We, as we talked about before, are planning on a special CMC meeting in April solely focused on that topic. So we will have a Robbinsdale CMC meeting like we had the Crystal one today in April, and then we're looking to put a second CMC meeting on where we'll not only have ourselves and Cura there, but also certainly hope to have anti-displacement working group members helping to present and answer questions as well.
Oh, that'll be wonderful, Commissioner.
Yes, two quick comments. One, there's a lot of people interested in this, so thank you. And so as you're summarizing the broader work, how to, abbreviate that for federal partners, for statewide partners, and so just want to commend that. And then now I'm just connecting, isn't there a conference late April? I mean, where there might be federal partners that might be local to here. It might be interesting to time.
There's an app.
Am I making that up or am I just too excited?
It's
Yeah, so I mean, if there's already an April consideration, there is a lot of interest for this. I'll leave it to the experts, but I wanted to at least make that connection mentally. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome, thank you. Councilmember
Yeah,
Lilligren.
thanks, Chair, and thanks for this. And I am really glad we're gonna have this supplemental meeting focusing just on this. I think that's great. And I like this organization of what was the first category? Prepare, Survive, Thrive?
Prepare, Survive, Thrive.
I love that, and I'm just wondering how much impact or influence that may have on the entire report. I mean, it's almost like every topic listed here could fall into those three categories. I just feel like that's a really good way of
I
organizing.
got some chills when I heard that.
What's that?
I got chills when I heard Ricardo come up
That
with
is
that.
really,
It's pretty good.
it is really good.
We focused a lot, I mean, even on Central Corridor, there's a lot of focus on surviving construction.
Right.
No doubt. But this idea of policies in place that help thrive, help the communities thrive after, that's really big.
I agree, and just to note, and I'm sure we all know this, but that's the risk, right? I mean, if you're talking about anti-displacement, businesses are more at risk after the project when the value's been added to the land and they're at risk of being scraped away for larger investment. So I'm really excited about this framework that's coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Me too.
May I say
Go
something
ahead,
real quick?
Ricardo.
I was just gonna say, like, super quickly, like, it's not, to be 100% honest with all of you, like, it's not super easy to support a project that could put community at risk out there, right? Because we do hear people very concerned, we hear people really not knowing, and these are not people with secret agendas, but they're true community members who live, work, go to school across the corridor. So anywhere where we can plug in hope that things are being re-examined to mitigate those known impacts, whether intentional or unintentional, help us do our work in telling people, look, I know that the street might be destroyed, but this is what we can expect out of the issues that will come our way. And that's why, again, if we see it in the station decisions document here, they're everywhere, so we can build some of that corroded trust. That's always helpful for us. And again, I really appreciate the intentionality, the money, the time invested into anti-displacement work, which we feel is not completed, obviously, but I'm hoping it can be fuel that can help people get behind this down the road. So I just felt like it was important to know that. So thanks.
Thank you for sharing. I'm really excited about April and getting that update as well as the updates afterwards.
And Chair,
as
I
we
may
look-
just mention, because Ricardo triggered it for me, also because it's not done. It's absolutely not done. So what does the next phase look like? That'll be part of what we want to do.
And with that, I think we have concluded. I know we have another meeting right after this, so we will be wrapping up. Thank you for coming and participating. Our next meeting is April 13th, and we will see you then. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
I think, yes.